It's difficult to be the last speaker. Nobody cares about you. The room is basically emptied out. People just want to go home, get this over with. And the truth is, I worry sometimes that that's the way people look at my son, my oldest child, Yedidya. Yedidya just turned 9 years old 2 days ago. And he's often forgotten by our society. A child with Down syndrome. A child with special needs. Now, researchers at Johns Hopkins have been working on a cure for Down syndrome. Can you imagine? You pop a pill, and you're suddenly cured. Take out a pill, pop a pill. You can cure the defects of Down syndrome. And my wife and I, often late at night, we debate with each other. If and when this pill is ready, are we going to give the pill to our Yedidya? And certainly it's a question of perspective. I think of the story that transpired in a Texas high school. There was a class that was incredibly rowdy. They basically decimated any teacher in their midst. And mid-year, they got another substitute teacher. And everybody was kind of making fun of her. You have that class. So she decided to take the time to investigate, to look into their files. And she discovers that these students are incredibly intelligent. One has an IQ of 154, another one 167, one has an IQ of 172, and another one has 179. She goes back to the class, and despite their rambunctiousness, she commits herself to educating, to teaching them, to helping them grow, and by the end of the year, this class is phenomenal, and she's being presented with the Teacher of the Year award. And the principal can't believe it. He says to her, "How did you accomplish such a thing?" And she's a bit embarrassed, she's a little surprised, and she says, "They have incredibly high IQs, go look in the file." So the principal can't believe it. He goes, he opens it up, and he looks in the file, and he comes back, he says, "Ma'am, these aren't their IQ scores, these are their locker numbers." But the truth is, life is a matter of perspective. How do you choose to look at an individual with a disability, an individual with special needs? Now, you're probably wondering why I have this scrub here from Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center. You can't see, there's some stains on it too. This is the shirt that I was wearing 9 years ago in Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center in Jerusalem when our son Yedidya was born. And you know, I've tried to throw this out a bunch of different times over the last 9 years, and I've never been able to do it. It's probably going to be with me for the rest of my life. Because to me, it represents that transformative moment in my experience. We had this child, it was our very first child, and we were told that there was a 99% chance that he had Down syndrome. And we were overwhelmed. We began to cry. We began to research Down syndrome. And shockingly, the nurses asked me if I'd like to hold my newborn child. And I was a bit taken aback. It's my baby, why wouldn't I want to hold my child? And they explained to me that many parents of children such as this do not want to touch the baby. They don't want to have anything to do with this child. And in fact, some very well-meaning people, after Yedidya's birth, try to convince us that we should give him up, that we shouldn't take him home, that we're newly married, we're a young couple, we'll have other children. Why do you need this burden? Why do you need this obstacle in your way, affecting potentially your future growth? But thankfully, my wife and I didn't listen to the naysayers. and we began the process of raising our Yedidya. And I thought of the maxim of the dictum that we learn in Pirkei Avos, in the ethics of our fathers. We just studied it this past week, where we're taught, Ezehu Chacham, who is the wise one? Halo made mikol Adam, the person who learns from every individual. Ezehu Ashir, who is the wealthy one? Hasameach bechelko, one who rejoices in his lot. Ezehu Gibor, who is the strong one? Hakovesh et Yitzro, the one who is able to conquer his or her innate desire. You see, our sages understood that we need to look at life and we need to look at basic assumptions from a counterintuitive perspective. In the sense that very often we put such a premium on how smart, what Ivy League school did he or she go to. But what I've learned from my Yedidya is that chachma, that wisdom, has to be defined with broader strokes. That it involves emotional intelligence as well as intellectual intelligence. That my child can sit with me 2 years ago during the NFL playoffs and watch that wild card game where Robert Griffin III, the star rookie of the Washington Redskins, RG3, who has that big knee brace, goes down, and Yedidya jumps up from his seat, and he goes, Abba, Daddy, sick. That man is sick. He felt that pain. He understood the anguish. And one Friday night, I got a little too excited with my Friday night singing, and I was gently banging a wine glass, and it shattered over my hand. And I quickly recoiled back. It was a little bit of blood. And Yedidya runs to the phone, and he goes, ambulance, ambulance. Is that not chachma? Is that not a wise individual? I don't encourage my children to call each other names. But one day, Yedidya comes home from his school, and he looks at his younger brother, and he goes, Meir, you're a loser. I was proud of him, because he obviously was able to inculcate from his classroom what a loser is, to adapt and to apply it to his brother. This is wisdom. The problem is that we live in a world where everybody has to judge things, snap judgments. What does the tweet say? What does Facebook say? What is the internet abuzz with? People aren't interested in getting to the core, understanding the depth of a person. I read a frightening account from one of the individuals who founded the genome of Down syndrome. He commented that many years ago in Austria, there were 2 babies born in the same hospital on the same day. One was a very strong, powerful cry, a baby boy, and the parents were oh so proud. And in the next room, there was a baby girl who had Down syndrome, and the parents were distraught. But they traced Jerome Lejeune, the Nobel Prize winner who found this gene. His father traced the story of these 2 individuals, and what he discovered was the young lady 50 years later with the Down syndrome was nursing her parents during their final illness. And that young, strong boy who the parents were so proud of, his name was Adolf Hitler. So who is to say if a person is smart? Who is to say? Who is to judge? And we need to be able to understand what our rabbis have taught us from the deepest, most esoteric sources of our faith. And that is that our great sages stood up when an individual with special needs walked into their presence. Because our sages were able to look at the core. They were able to see that soul, that pristine, pure soul from which emanates all of life. And we perfect individuals, with our perfect bodies and perfect intellects, that often interferes or runs interference with the expression of our soul. But those in our midst who are limited physically, who are limited intellectually, they don't have that barrier. Their soul is able to shine through. It's able to be touched. It's able to be felt. And we need to open ourselves up to the perfection of imperfection, to be able to touch, to be able to taste the sweetness and the beauty of those in our midst that really have so much to contribute, if only not put last in line, if only given the opportunity. I'd like to conclude my remarks this evening with the following anecdote. There is a great Hasidic master who lives in Monsey, New York. And on a Saturday night, he has many people, many of his disciples come to line up for a blessing from their master. And on a particular Saturday night, there was one individual standing in line who didn't fit in. He was wearing tattered jeans, ripped t-shirt, a big white yarmulke, kippah head covering, where the rest of the classic people online were dressed in black garb, beards, black headgear, black head covering, and the gabbai, the assistant to the Hasidic master, was perplexed what this individual was doing. So when the individual made his way into the inner sanctum of the rabbi, the assistant listened in, and he heard that the individual requested a blessing for a young man. And when he left the room, so the assistant asked the individual in the tattered jeans, "What's your connection to that young man? Why do you have such interest in that young man?" And the individual in the tattered jeans and the non-Hasidic garb explained that this was one of his campers in a camp for special needs children. And the camper was a follower of this particular grand Hasidic master. And because of his disability, he didn't appreciate the normal electronic gadgets that typical children might appreciate. So he thought what would be special for this camper on his birthday would be to get a special blessing for him from his master. And he begins to look, and he notices that the assistant to the Hasidic master is crying. He's bawling. And he says, "I'm sorry, did I offend you? Why are you crying?" And the assistant responds, "You don't understand. That young boy is my son." At which point he embraced him heartily. It's unbelievable. When somebody looks different than we do, we distance ourselves. We begin to scorn, to mock, to scoff. Look at him. He doesn't fit. He looks different. Something doesn't feel right about him. But when we look to the core, when we see how much a person cares, when we see their essence, we're able to get past the externalities, and we're able to embrace that core, that inner essence. And I think that's why I hold on to this for dear life, because to me it represents the beginning of my opening my eyes, of looking at the world differently, seeing people differently. And in truth, if I had to give my son the pill, although it's tempting if it would enhance his quality of life, I'd have very serious reservations of tampering with the beautiful soul that he truly, truly is. Thank you so much for listening.